Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of The Skin and Stitch, a podcast following two friends in their journey through medical education. I'm John, and today I'm joined by my co host, Mahak. Today we're diving into the realm of artificial intelligence in the medical field. Regardless of your thoughts on AI, you can't deny it's changing the world in a big way. So let's get started.
This is episode 2 of The Skin and Stitch, and I'm Mahak Sharma, and this is my co-host, John Winton, and we are super excited to share with you our new topic for today.
Yep, and now we have way more fans than the first episode, so
Yes,
we might be
shout out.
maybe 20 followers or something. So
I checked. Wait, let me check right now. Let me give you the latest and greatest update. It's 29.
29 followers. Wow. So this is really our 5 seconds of fame. We've made it at Superstars. So how have you been doing, Mahak?
I've been well. Since we last spoke, I have been well. I had a recent exam, so I was really focused on studying for that and just making sure that I had all my ducks in a row. But things have been well. I know that a close friend of yours visited you recently, so how's that been?
Yeah, that was great. You've met him before, but he's a medical student in Europe, so a very different system. We should probably have him on sometime to discuss that. But we went to Yosemite for a couple days, and so that was really cool. And I also went to a thrift store and I found a Coca-Cola glass.
Did you? Let me see it.
$2.
Oh my gosh. Really? Wow.
Yeah.
It kind of looks vintage,
I know. So
yeah.
I mean, you can't call that a success. And what is a success? Anyway.
Are you drinking Coca-Cola right now?
No, iced tea, unsweetened.
Unsweetened. Do you want to know what I'm drinking?
What?
Right. It's an Alani. I recently got hooked on them. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. However, because, like it's an energy drink, but I do really like them, like for studying. 10 calories, 0 sugar, keeps you awake for days.
Should we do this every episode? Like, what are we
drinking? Like a little drink. Like, what are we drinking?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was also recently made aware that people can't really tell what the logo is. And I'm a bit offended as the logo creator.
As the logo creator, yeah.
Clear the air right now and say that it is a stitch, yes, stitching skin, and it makes a podcast mic. And so I think everybody needs to know that. And it's just be appreciative that, and get ready for this segue, I'm not using AI to create this art. And so that brings us to the topic of today's podcast, which is AI in medicine.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start off with a little overview. So, as everybody probably knows, AI has been making a lot of headlines recently in professional environments. OpenAI has really changed many, many fields, including education for students, for professors, for industry people, since its release, maybe I think 3 years ago. Every so often it makes big headlines, like they claim that GPT-4 scored in the top 10th of exam takers for the bar exam for lawyers. Just recently, I think maybe a week or two ago, there was a bit of internet buzz about an AI-generated attorney in a courtroom recently, which I don't think the judge really liked. In 2023, in the medical field, there was a big story about how ChatGPT correctly diagnosed a child's chronic pain after 17 doctors over 3 years misdiagnosed it. And just recently, in an article published in Nature, GPT-4 was found to have answered about 90% of USMLE style questions correct. So I don't think it's actually taken a full step exam like it did for the bar exam, but it's pretty interesting to see that, at least from the um, exams, written exams, I guess not really practical applications, but from the examination standpoint, it seems to be doing well in multiple different fields.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's very interesting, especially because I think from when ChatGPT first started, at least in my personal experience, I think that it's evolved very rapidly. Up until pretty recently, I think ChatGPT has a disclaimer. It says like, we only include information up until 2023 or 2024. And now we're seeing the introduction of new AIs. Like there's a Copilot and Grok and all these different platforms. And they're like, well, we actually take information up until 2025, or we're updating our information constantly. So you're kind of seeing, I don't want to say competition, but you're seeing people wanting to improve AI, more and more. And I think that's why it's so important to discuss, because it doesn't impact the student, which is something that I kind of wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Just quickly, I think you're right that it does have a big impact. And, it is important to discuss because it's a very polarizing topic, right? Some people say it's really good, it's really helpful. There's other people who are, scared to their wits' end about AI. I think it's going to take over humanity and enslave us and all this stuff. But nobody can deny that it's not making big waves right now and impacting every sphere of medicine. So yeah, let's start with the students.
Yeah, so I think as a current medical student, I did not use ChatGPT very much in undergrad, if at all, I think. But my involvement began when I started medical school. And I think the reason why it's so helpful is because it's really easily integrated into your education, and it allows for personalized learning. Like, I know a lot of my friends and classmates actually use ChatGPT to generate like USMLE style practice questions for specific topics that we might want to reinforce, or we may customize study plans. So you can just type in like, I want to score this % on this exam. These are all the materials I need to learn. What's the best way for me to learn this material, or what's the most likely question that students miss off of this specific topic? And what it does is it really learns to recognize like your flaws and your strengths as a person, at least from what I've been doing with it. And then that way you can kind of have these learning goals in different timelines, which I think is really neat because it allows for really like focused learning. And I do think that it's a very powerful supplement to traditional medical educational resources. Recently, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'll go. I think that's really interesting. And then probably it's nice to hear from your point of view, because for people who are not students, and if you hear about, this student is using AI to help them in class, you instantly think, oh, it's doing work for you, it's cheating or something, right? But so I think it's important to hear this, how it can be used to, I guess, enhance your education and make you more effective at learning things.
Yeah, and I will talk a little bit, we can talk about this a little bit later, but I will talk and touch on the fact about how to use AI properly, especially in like a research setting, and things around that. But I did want to mention that whether it's seeing students or seeing the boost or the boom of AI, traditional medical school resources like ScholarRx, that's a really common resource used among med students, has really made a bold leap forward. As of March 2025, it actually started a new like AI enhanced tool. So basically, you have high yield questions that are generated directly from the course content. So it's kind of doing the same thing that students are, but just on its own platform. And that way, it's actually used for faculty as well. So professors can upload a lecture slide, and then you get these board style questions which match exactly what you need to know. And then it also gives students access to detailed performance data. So if you have like difficulty in a certain category or a certain organ system, you're able to retake assessments and actually learn this content through repetition and feedback that's based off of exactly what you need. So it's kind of like a personalized learning loop. And I really do think it's a future forward shift that aligns education with clinical reasoning, because you're not just using AI for efficiency anymore, but you're using it for precision. And I think it's kind of the upgrade that medical education has needed for a long time. Yeah, and honestly, it's given me a newfound respect for the students who trained before the start of AI, because the amount of times that my classmates and I asked, like, can you simplify this lecture? Or can you, teach me this? Like, I'm 12 years old, like something to really, really like dumb down the information, because it's so dense and so complicated. It really, I honestly think it makes you appreciate the material that you're learning more, just because it gives you so much respect for everybody who learned the information without AI. And kind of shifting from education, I do think there's different things that it also can be used for. So recently, our school discussed like a virtual reality opportunity. So you put like a mask over your eyes, basically, or goggles over your eyes, and it can reenact like different clinical scenarios. And what I had in my mind was, I think it could be useful to practice breaking difficult news to patients. I've heard from my roommate, she's going to be a resident soon, and she was talking about her experiences during rotation. And she was like, the first time you witness something really traumatizing, the first time you have to say something really difficult to a patient, it can be very hard. And I think being able to experience that as real as possible as a practice run would be beneficial for the like emotional safety of the student, but also for the patient who, is experiencing this med student tell them something for the first time. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. As I've been going into medical education and learning more about how these students get trained, I tend to compare it to learning how to drive. One day you don't know how to drive at all, and then the next day they put you in control of this, couple thousand-pound car and say, try not to hit anything and try not to kill anybody, right? And so there's no substitute. There's no way that you can learn without being there. And at least that's how it was for medicine before things like virtual reality and these methods where you can there is like a realm where you can practice that's not real life. And it's really hard before AI to have that, because how do you have a fake patient who truly, like, their diagnosis is real and everything seems real, right? And so before that, it seems like it's the same thing. You're not speaking to patients, and then the next day they put you in the room and you have to tell them some bad news or something. And so it's definitely kind of hard to control. And I think we're moving in a much better direction.
I agree. And I think there are some limits to the use of AI. I recently attended a donor ceremony for, it was basically a ceremony honoring the individuals who donated their bodies to science, which we were using an anatomy lab and doing dissections with. And there's something really interesting said during that ceremony, and kind of paraphrasing it, the general discussion was something like human anatomy, where you go in and you dissect and you learn from the human body. I don't think that's something that AI could replace. Like, that's something that's very human, and it teaches you a completely different level of respect for the profession that we're going to be entering. And so I think there are caveats to it. Like, I think it's beneficial in many ways, but then something like human anatomy, and we can talk about like HIPAA and research and things like that too, where you can't use AI for everything. Like, when I do research now, I don't even implement anything that I'm doing in research with AI, because, for example, ChatGPT, that's OpenAI. You put something in it, it will push that out to somebody else who might be asking the same question. That's kind of how it works. And so it's really important to like have a very clear boundary. If you're doing a case report, you can't just put any sort of data into that machine, because then that's like a HIPAA violation. So I think really I think AI, like, not like a rules course, but schools should maybe try to consider adding in like a rules and regulations course of AI, because it's really exciting and it's new. But I think a lot of students might not know the boundaries of like, hey, I can use this, or I really shouldn't be using this for AI. So yeah, kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I think we had spoken about this, also not on the podcast, but a lot of journals now have clauses about ensuring that everything that's written is actually written by a person. And as much as a journal is meant to disseminate scientific deduction and new findings, it's also, I think it's uniquely something, it's meant for human communication. And so to just have an AI write everything out, it's kind of takes away a bit at the, I don't know, the art of research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you have anything else to add, I think we can move on to the part after the medical education, which is becoming a physician and how AI can change that field.
Absolutely. I think, yep, that works well with me.
So I think if you asked anybody, how can AI help a physician? I think something that most people could probably pick up is physicians have a lot of paperwork that they have to do, right? When you're writing down notes while you're speaking to a patient, or afterwards when you're filling out the patient's chart, when you're sending notes to the patient, there's a lot of writing and a lot of stuff that happens behind the scene, and it makes medicine not really a 9-to-5 job. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do outside of those hours to usually complete your paperwork. And so there's an article published recently in the Harvard Gazette, I think in March, about this new platform called Open Evidence. It's launched from the Mayo Clinic platform, and it utilizes knowledge from the New England Journal of Medicine. And currently it's only available to healthcare providers in the US, and it's free, but they claim to be able to analyze drug interactions, double check drug dosage, even write home care instructions. And so I think obviously it's relying on journals, which is probably better than relying just on the web in general. I think as it gets better and smarter, it can definitely change how much time physicians devote to stuff like directly caring for patients versus filling out forms. I think there is still a concern about how AI tends to sometimes fabricate things and present them to the user as reality. And that's something that is probably the effects are magnified in the medical profession. And that's something that people will have to figure out how to get around or how to fix in the future.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a concept that maybe 50 years ago wasn't really even imaginable. Like you wouldn't have thought that this was even possible. And so with time and with changes in technology, there comes advances. But then I also think there can be consequences to that. And so making sure that we know how to mitigate any negative effects equally, as well as, you're pushing out all the different tools that people can use is really important, because at the end of the day, I think all physicians want is to have the best for their patients. And so that's in terms of having different platforms like this, but then also making sure that safety remains the number one priority. I did want to also talk about a recent article that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine AI, and actually on April 24th, I believe. So very recent. Pediatric glioma recurrence predicted by temporal learning AI model. And so this article I thought was unique because it kind of is one of the most interesting examples of AI's clinical power. And it's a model developed by MathGen to predict the recurrence of pediatric glioma. So it's not just an algorithm, but it's a temporal deep learning tool that analyzes MRI scans over time and tries to detect like subtle changes that human eyes really can't reliably catch. And for children who've undergone, tumor resection, it could mean fewer unnecessary MRIs, less emotional stress, and earlier intervention when it really matters the most. And so I don't think this is really just a diagnostic tool, but it's a paradigm shift in how we understand disease trajectories. And so I thought that was really cool. I mean, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it's scary, but it is interesting to see, because I'm a big proponent for AI in many different things. And so I don't want to say it's scary, but it is really interesting how something that the human eye can't determine or detect is analyzed so well by AI and can help people. And
Yeah, and I think this is what we can discuss this in maybe like 5 minutes about how if it is able to detect something that a physician can't, then would it take the place of the physician or stuff like that. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to quickly also bring up an example from the realm of plastic surgery. So this is published in the Aesthetic Plastic Surgery Journal. So it's, but I do think it has also connections to reconstructive surgery. So they used an image generating model to basically take the preoperative image of a patient and create the postoperative image for rhinoplasty, which is, a procedure. And then they gave it to these participants, and showed them the preoperative image, the AI generated postoperative image, and the real postoperative image, and tried to see if they could figure out which one was, the AI one and which one was real. And so I think this is a very big step forward to being able to help surgeons plan for procedures. AI imaging has really grown leaps and bounds. I think a couple of years ago, if you looked at AI images, they look all wonky, and now, Congress currently is trying to pass something to criminalize certain deepfakes and require that they be taken down. And so the imaging capabilities of AI has really grown a lot. And I think in this case, it could be used for good for surgeons, especially in reconstructive surgery or, aesthetic surgery, where visual is so important. If you're doing breast reconstruction after mastectomy, then it would be nice to be able to see, if to tell the AI, if I did this and this, then what would it look like, And I think it would lead to more patient satisfaction and more success for the surgeon. So yeah, those are some field-specific examples, but maybe let's move on to some of the worries for physicians with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I also did want to kind of mention, this is like a random thought I had, like nothing crazy scientific, but let's say, I'm a physician and I tell my patient, after your surgery, this is what you're going to look like. And I give them a postoperative image. And let's say that this surgery, there's complications or something doesn't go as planned. And then it doesn't end up working out. And I do think that we might not see a lot of that right now because this is emerging, but I think there are complications that can happen in surgeries. And so it will be interesting maybe to see how those situations will be handled professionally, especially when the patient now has a very real and visible concept in their head of this is exactly what I'm going to be able to have my product. You know, this is exactly what I'm going to look like. And so you're making like large promises in general as a surgeon. But I think also adding AI on top of that is going to kind of not increase responsibility, because I think responsibility is always there, but definitely I think there's going to be some sort of feeling about that is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think we could move on to a little bit about job security. So one of the most obvious, or I guess not obvious, but one of the most talked about ways that people are saying AI could replace physicians is in radiology, in the interpretation of images, which obviously AI has been learning how to do. And so in a recent article published in European Radiology, they gave the AI, I think, 25,000 images about. So it's a pretty big sample. And the AI identified incorrect or incomplete reports for 21% of images. And so that's basically the AI saying, I think that this corresponds to this image corresponds to this diagnosis.
Okay.
That's a discrepancy between what the actual human radiologist said.
Okay.
The 21% sounds like a big number, but after institutional radiologists looked at those discrepancies, they decided that only about 0.7% of that 21%, or about 0.1% of all the cases, all the 25,000, were medically important discrepancies. So the rest could be a minor thing that doesn't affect the patient's care plan. And so, you know, it seems like AI has the potential to greatly improve accurate diagnoses, but the improvement that they provide is not usually super, life-saving or anything. So I don't, in my opinion, I think this implies that AI could be used to enhance a radiologist's job, but it probably cannot replace them, because the AI would find all these discrepancies that are not really that important. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you want to talk about the other fields.
I think I do want to add to that. I think I do agree with you on this, because AI is only trained, like as of right now, on all the information that is known currently, right? And it takes that information, it predicts basically like, okay, all these patterns I'm recognizing, so I think that this situation corresponds to this. And in those, unique cases where something was totally like not what you thought it was, or, oh, this is actually this, I think that can only be really recognized by a physician who has like years and years of in-person experience and actual medical training. Because there's a lot of things that we learn right now, even where, usually this disease presents with XYZ, and in extremely, extremely rare cases, it can also present as blank, And so I do think that it can't replace the physician. What worries me is now that AI platforms have image upload options, I do know where people will upload a picture of their mole, or they'll upload a picture of something, and they'll say, what do you think this is? Is this dangerous? Is this something I need to go to the doctor for? And so I think it's really important that the general public knows you can't just rely on AI to tell you exactly, like, yeah, you should go to the doctor. Oh, no, don't go to the doctor, because the AI can actually miss something extremely rare, in my opinion, because it's maybe not something that follows a generalized pattern. So definitely there for, enhancement, but not something that can replace a physician's job.
Yeah. And I think for the worried physician or worried medical hopeful who's wondering about how this field is going to change with the introduction of AI, I would say that being a doctor, it is really the process of caring for somebody is a really human interaction, and it requires a lot of empathy, which I think AI can tried to reproduce. But there is something very special and unique about humans, a human interaction that comforts patients. If you showed up to the doctor's office with a big worry about, something wrong with your skin or, a lump or something, and you had to speak almost to a chat GPT type thing, like if Siri was talking back to you, I don't think it would give you that same sense of, I don't think anybody would say that they prefer that, is basically what I'm saying.
No.
And so, that would freak me out. So
it would. Yeah.
I think that AI is not here to replace physicians, but hopefully to make their jobs better. So
yeah, when you go to the doctor's office, they're like, when I go and I have a worry, and the doctor, like, they nod, and they look at you in the eyes and maybe like, they're like, oh, it's going to be whatever. This is going to be okay. And this is what we're going to do. I even think like, this is not something scientifically backed. This is my opinion. But I think like, if I'm using hand gestures and I'm making eye contact and I'm looking at somebody and I'm leaning in and I speak to them, that connection is there. And like you said, a human connection, that comfort that you get from talking to somebody who is a professional and somebody who you trust. I don't think a screen typing out words and telling you, yeah, you have a 10 months or something like that. You can't just do that. And so I agree. I don't think that will be a concern for job replacement. Yeah, at least in the near future.
Yeah, I think, and we're running low on time, but one last thing I wanted to talk about is a little appeal to the use of AI in medicine. And I think a lot of patients don't see it this way, is that patients might hear about doctors plugging in symptoms or asking about a certain diagnosis or drug into a LLM like ChatGPT. And they will say, healthcare costs so much in the US, and how come I'm coming to this doctor and he's just putting it into the computer when I could have done that at home? And I think that's a valid question by the patient. But what people don't tend to realize is that the doctors aren't blindly following these instructions, and they are using their own education to kind of either corroborate with the recommendations by this platform and just to enhance the care, not to replace their own thoughts. And so AI, one of the downsides is it learns from humans, and it learns from all types of things that are published online. There is pseudoscience that gets published online. Articles, for example, about linking autism to vaccines, stuff that will get disproved later down the line. But you want to, as a medical professional, you probably have encountered these articles, and what to believe and what not to believe. And so if you were just a patient putting all your symptoms into AI, my concern for right now, at least, is that not everything that it says will be true. And so that's why I think, there is a difference between you putting the symptoms yourself into AI versus a doctor using it to enhance the care.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it better than you. That sounds pretty accurate and in tune with how I feel about that as well. You go through 8 years of schooling to become a doctor, and at the end, hopefully, what to believe and what not to believe what you see on the internet. So,
yeah. Well, I think we probably ran over. We can't tell for now, but this whole episode was really, I guess, a current events discussion, and I think maybe a year down the line, or even 6 months down the line, we could have this same topic and talk about completely different things, because that's how fast the field is changing. So
I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else that we want to add, or should we end it right here?
And you know what? I think I have talked enough for this podcast. I feel like we have talked about the topic, and
maybe
I know
maybe people are getting tired of our voice. I think we should probably bring on a guest next time.
Yeah, maybe we bring someone else, to just kind of put in their input so that you don't hear my muffled voice. Hopefully my speaker is fixed by now. I guess we'll find out after you fix the recording and such.
Okay, well, sounds good. So, we will see you guys on the next episode of the Skin and Stitch. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.
All right, bye.